redefining modern financial cybercrime as we know it. So think account takeovers, credit card theft, phishing schemes, stimulus fraud, synthetic fraud, identity theft overall. That type of stuff was a lot of what I'm responsible for being on the ground floor of.
Brett, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for bringing me. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's not very often I get to bring somebody on that made a career out of breaking the law for 30 years. So I am pumped to interview you and talk about some of the things you did, because it just, oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack here. But real quick, one of the things that you said, and, I watched a bunch of your stuff is, when they caught up to you, I think you were vacationing in Disneyland, right?
Vacationing is a nice euphemism for hiding out from federal authorities.
Right. But hey, if you're going to hide out from, when you said that, if you're going to hide out from federal authorities, there is not many better places than Disneyland. You can get lost everywhere in Disneyland. So how they found you, that's kind of what I want to know. Like, were you on the roller coaster? Were you, what were you doing when they actually found you? And what was that like?
Well, what's interesting is my plea agreement, because I pled guilty. I pled guilty to 39 felonies. If you take things to trial in the federal system, they put you under the prison. So of course the smart people pled guilty. I'm not an idiot. Pled guilty, got 7.5 years ultimately. The way they caught me, and the reason I mentioned pleading guilty, part of my plea agreement was I can never request Freedom of Information Acts. My FOIA requests are done for the rest of my life. The reason for that is the way they caught me. And they used this thing back then. It was called a triggerfish. Today it's called a stingray. So I think that maybe some of the listeners have heard of this device. It's kind of a cell phone spoofing device or a tower spoofing device that can locate a specific device within 7 feet. So I was in Orlando. I had gotten there. I'd been there about 6 weeks. Of course, I was going to Disney World and Universal every day. And I had rented a timeshare. I'd rent it for, I figured what happened was I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. The night before, I'd stolen $160,000 out of ATMs. Woke up the next morning, I'm United States Most Wanted. I'm sitting there looking at the screen at my picture, everything else. And finally, I said it out loud. I was like, Brett, you've made the U.S. Most Wanted list. What now? And my next words were, I'm going to Disney World. So like the idiot that I am, that's exactly what I did. So went there, rented a timeshare, paid cash for that for 9 months. The idea was to lay low long enough that I might be able to get a passport and bug out down to Brazil, where I was going to set up shop once again. But they located me with using a stingray. It was September 16th of 2006. Yeah, 2006 was when that was. And I was in the timeshare. It was like 10:30 in the morning. Heard this knock at the door. I was used to all the builders because it's a brand new complex and they were still building the thing. I was used to all these builders coming by and making sure everything was working all right. So I heard this knock, got up, looked through the peephole. No one's there. I'm like, huh. So I opened the door, step out into the hallway, and walking down the hallway are 2 South Carolina Secret Service agents that I had worked with and an Orange County deputy. So they turn around and they're like, hey, Brett. And I'm like, hey, Bobby, how are you? And he's like, I'm good. How are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. And he was like, I looked at him and I was like, do you want to come in? And he's like, yeah, let's put you in cuffs first. And I was like, probably a good idea. and things went south from there. So.
Now, is this the time when they brought you in, when you decided to release yourself because the institution was no longer benefiting you?
Again, another nice euphemism for escape, but that was later. So I had, the interesting thing is, Shadow Crew was the group that I started and ran. That makes the front cover of Forbes, August of 2004. They arrest 33 people, October 6th of 2004. October 26th of 2004. I was the only guy that got away. They picked me up 4 months later, gave me a job. And it's after that, because I continued to break the law inside of Secret Service offices. It's after that I made the United States Most Wanted list. And after I got caught on that I escaped from prison. Needless to say, I'm kind of a slow learner at some things.
It just sounds like you were going for mastery. That's all I'm taking out of this.
Well, try and try again, I guess, right?
Oh my goodness.
Pure idiot. You want to know the truth about it.
Exactly. So, folks, like a couple things, you can do some research here, but, he's known as the original internet godfather, for so many of the things that you did. And I think a lot of people, when they hear internet and cyber crimes and all this stuff, they think that, the people behind that are just hackers.
Right.
I wore the hoodie especially for this. They put the hoodie up. We've seen all the videos, and that wasn't your case. So, like, where did all this begin? Let's go back to, like, how do you actually get into cyber crime and all
Sure.
this fun, exciting stuff here?
That's a really good point that you make. A lot of people think that online criminals are these kind of upper tier computer geniuses, hackers, whatever you want to call them, that can break into any type of computer system they want to. And that's typically not the case. You have those upper tier attackers like that. But the majority, 98, 99%, they're just very good social engineers. My life of crime, so I ended up being convicted of 39 felonies, but my life of crime began when I was 10. I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and I'm sure that some of the listeners have an area where they're aware of things like this, where if you're not fortunate enough to have a job, you may be in, scamming, hustling, committing fraud, what have you. My mom was a fraudster, and I didn't know that. So my mom had that criminal mindset. My dad was a really good guy. My dad's problem was he loved my mom. He loved her to the degree that he didn't want to lose her, was scared that he would. So anything she wanted to do, he would co-sign off on. If she wanted to commit a crime, he'd back it up. If she wanted to abuse someone, he wouldn't stand in the way. And she was, and she's still alive. She was and is a very abusive person. She's got some psychological issues as well. But my mom used to bring men home in front of my dad. My dad would cry and beg her not to do it. My mom finally leaves my dad. I was 10. My sister Denise was 9. We were in Panama City, Florida. We moved back to Hazard, Kentucky, right in the heart of coal country. And my mom was just, she could be physically abusive, but her heart was in the emotional, the verbal, the mental. She was very negligent. Used to leave me and Denise at home for days at a time. And where my life of crime begins, we'd been at home for a few days. I was the kid that, I'd post up at the window, see if mom was coming home. Sometimes I'd walk out into the driveway, see if she was driving down the street. Wow. Denise, 9 years old, she was the kid who was angry all the time. And she's still got those anger issues today. So we didn't have any food in the house. Denise walks in one day and she's got this pack of pork chops in her hand. And I'm like, where'd you get that? And she's like, I stole it. And I was like, show me how you did that. So she takes me over and she shows me how she's stealing food at 9 years old. I'm 10, not much better, but I'm from Eastern Kentucky. And that's the idea, in case no one knows, if you're from an area like that, especially that area, it's the man's job to take care of stuff. So I'm not gonna let my sister do that. So we start stealing food and look across the way. There's a Kmart over there. Well, Kmart's got clothes and toys and jewelry and everything else. Start stealing that. Mom finally comes home, notices all the stolen loot, asks where it came from. I'm the kid that stands up and said, we found it. My mom's like, no, you didn't find that. Denise stands up. We stole it. My mom looks at my sister, show me how you did that. And she starts running us as little shoplifters. She not only does that, but she calls her mother to join us. And we used to take these little road trips. I'd go to JCPenney's, steal clothes and jewelry. I'd go to the bookstore, steal books. So that's where my life of crime begins. And I talk about that in every presentation and in most interviews that I give. I need people to understand that my upbringing doesn't result in my choices as an adult. When you're a child, you can't help what the adults in your circle do. You're going to do what they tell you to do. But when I became an adult, I made the choices to commit crime, victimize other people. That was my choice to do that. My sister had the exact same upbringing that I did. Other than that one shoplifting experience, she doesn't break the law anymore. She goes off to be a good parent, a school teacher, just a really good citizen. She's got anger issues, but she's a good person. That's when my crimes began. And as I got older, I found out that not only my mom was a fraudster, but basically everyone on that side of the family. Big surprise. So I got more involved in the types of scams and frauds that entire side of the family committed. So I grew up, from age 10 on up, I grew up knowing how to commit charity fraud, insurance fraud, burning homes for cash, faking stolen cars, illegally mining coal, forging documents, I mean, you name it, drug trafficking. I mean, you name it. I was involved in that until finally it was 90, I think it was 96, 94, 96. I faked a car accident to get the insurance money to get married, moved from Hazard, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky to go to UK. And again, you know, I get a lot of this, everything comes from mom and dad. From mom, I get the mindset, that criminal mindset. From my dad, I've always had that fear of the people that I love leaving, because that's what my dad had. And so I got married, very unhealthy for me, because I'm the guy that goes overboard on everything. I told my wife, I was like, don't worry about working. I got it. Oh, don't worry about the cooking and the cleaning. I got it. So here I am, 60-hour a week job, 18-hour class load, doing all the cooking, all the cleaning. Couldn't do it. And something had to give. What gave was the job. That proclivity toward fraud I've got to eat, and didn't really know how. I was doing little scams and hustles in the area. Of course I was. But finally I found eBay. Liked eBay a lot. It was right as eBay transitioned. They used to sell Pez dispensers, and eBay transitioned to an auction site. Right at that point, found eBay, liked it a lot, didn't know how to make money on it. And it turns out that I got a lot of my initial inspiration from Bill O'Reilly. So he was the host of Inside Edition back then, 30-minute news tabloid show.
That was a great show, by the way.
It was a good show, man. It was a really good show. So I was watching that one night, and Bill's on there talking about Beanie Babies. This one they were profiling was Peanut, the Royal Blue Elephant, selling for $1,500. I'm sitting there watching like, need to find me a peanut. So I was naive. My dumb ass thought that, you know, you could go to the Hallmark stores and find one that was in a bin that somebody had just overlooked. So, you know, 3 hours plus of trying to do that, I figured out, well, no, idiot, peanuts on eBay for $1,500. But what happened was, you know, I'm sitting there looking at all these little Beanie Babies, and they had these gray ones, looked just like Peanut, except it was gray. I'm sitting there going, So buy a gray Beanie Baby elephant for $8, stop by Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue Rit dye, go home, try to dye the little guy. Needless to say, I didn't do well in home economics. Turns out they're made out of polyester. You get them out of the bath, look like they've got the mange. So, but I ripped a lady off of $1,500. Found a picture of a real one online, posted it. She thought it had the real thing. She wins the bid. As soon as she wins the bid, I send her a message because I wanted to put her on the defensive. And the message was basically, lady, congratulations. You won the bid. Outstanding. By the way, we've never done any business before. I don't even know if I can trust you. What I need you to do is go down to the U.S. Postal Service, pick up a couple of money orders totaling $1,500 issued by the United States government, protects us both. Send that to me. As soon as I get that, I'll send the animal to you. She believed that. She sends me the money orders. I cash them out, send her the creature. Immediately get a phone call. Phone call was, this is not what I ordered. My response, lady, you ordered a blue elephant. I sent you a blue-ish elephant. And that's really the interesting thing. That's really one of the first lessons of cybercrime that not only I learned, but most everyone learns today. And that lesson is, if you delay a victim, you just keep putting them off. A lot of them get so exasperated, they throw their hands in the air, walk away. You don't hear from them again. And very few complain to law enforcement. That's still the lesson today, whether you're an individual or a company. Most companies never file with law enforcement at all. Most individuals never make claims with law enforcement, anything else like that. That's the first crime I committed online. Very unsophisticated. Did it under my own name. Got away with it though. Kept going until I started to learn more about those dynamics of how online crime should operate. So I got to where I was selling pirated software. Pirated software led into installing mod chips into first gaming systems so you could play pirated games. Then mod chips into cable boxes so you can watch all the pay-per-view. Yeah. So I was doing that. And then finally
we had one of those. Maybe we got it.
See? Yeah, you get like $30. You could buy a strip of them out of Hong Kong for like $4 a piece. Then you charge somebody, you know, $30 for the chip. If you wanted it installed, you charge $75. And they were more than happy to do that because you'd get to watch the WWF and everything else that you wanted to.
Absolutely.
So started doing that, and that led into programming satellite DSS cards. Those 18-inch RCA systems, you pull the card out on it, program it, turns on all the channels like the cable boxes. Started doing that And about the same time, a Canadian judge comes out with a ruling that says, hey, Canadian citizens can pirate satellite DSS signals. His reasoning, said it in court. He's like, RCA doesn't sell the systems here. My citizens can pirate it. Idiot.
Wow.
Yeah, idiot, straight idiot. So what happens is overnight, United States, little cottage industry pops up. You go down to Best Buy, buy the system for $100, take it out in the parking lot, open it up, pull the system out, pull the card out, throw the system away, program the card, ship it to Canada, $500 a pop. Started doing that, making a lot of money, had so many orders, could not fill them quickly. And I mean quickly, within like 2 weeks, thought to myself, why do I need to fill any of the orders? They're in Canada. I'm down here. It's illegal. Who are they going to complain to? So stole even more money at that point.
Wow.
I was stealing about $6,000 a week and got worried about how much was coming in. Thought I was going to be looked at for money laundering. Figured the best thing that I could do is get a fake ID, open up a bank account with that, cash out through the ATM. No idea where to get a fake ID. So I get online, look around, think I find a guy, send him $200, send him my picture. Dude rips me off. And I got angry. I got real angry. And the outcome of that ultimately was this change in the way that cybercrime operates. There are 3 sites. There's Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, and Carter Planet. I built and ran Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew. A gentleman by the name of Dmitry Golubov, Ukrainian national, builds Carter Planet. Well, Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew, specifically Shadow Crew, before those sites come into play, the only avenue you had to commit organized crime was an IRC chat session, this rolling chat board where you had no idea who you were talking to, if you could trust them, if they had a product, if they actually had it, if it worked, or if they were just going to rip you off because everyone there was a crook. Shadow Crew gave a trust mechanism for criminals to use. Now you had a large communication channel. You could learn from that. You could ask questions. You could take part in those conversations, days, weeks, months old. You knew by looking at someone's screen name what the skill level of that individual was, the history of that individual. If you could learn from that individual, work with that individual. We had vouching systems in place, escrow systems in place, review systems in place, all with the purpose of establishing trust with criminals when they would never know each other's real name, wouldn't know what each other looked like, would never meet in the real world. And it was highly successful. It became, so Shadow Crew is really the precursor of today's darknet markets. That trust mechanism is still in play today. That's exactly how trust is established on the dark web. Now, there are other channels out today like Telegram, Discord, where trust works a little bit differently. But for the big dogs, that's how trust is established to this day. Shadow Crew goes on to, I mentioned it before, Shadow Crew goes on to make the front cover of Forbes August of 04 headline, Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26th of 04, United States Secret Service arrests 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I'm the only guy publicly mentioned as getting away. They pick me up 4 months later, give me a job. The people that I was associated with, I'm referred to as the original internet godfather because of building that type of trust mechanism, but also those 39 felonies had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime as we know it. So think account takeovers, credit card theft, phishing schemes, stimulus fraud, synthetic fraud, identity theft overall. That type of stuff was a lot of what I'm responsible for being on the ground floor of. The other individuals I was associated with, it's basically a who's who of, if you want to call them hackers, but cyber criminals over the past 20 years. You've got Albert Gonzalez. He's the #1 credit card thief in history. He had Heartland Payment Systems, Dave & Buster's, TJ Maxx. He was our forum techie, goes on to become the largest credit card thief in history. 170 million credit cards, 2 20-year prison sentences. We had Dmitry Golubov. He's the guy who basically starts modern credit card theft as we know it today. You had Jonathan James. He, as a minor, he broke into NASA, broke into the Pentagon. He actually shut the NASA computers down for 6 weeks before he partners with Albert, is arrested, and then ultimately commits suicide. I mean, it's, you look at all these names and it's like, yeah, everyone got their start back at Shadow Crew at that point.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And back to that Beanie Baby, you know, you had mentioned this in another video I watched. Perception is more important than reality, and I think that goes far beyond cybercrime or anything else. I think the reality and what we perceive as reality is more evident today than I've ever seen it before. I mean, with the media and everything they're doing, I mean, it's just, that's the old look
Right.
over here while we do this over here. And that's the perception. I mean,
When you think about it, the only thing that ultimately matters is trust. So how does not only a criminal establish trust, but someone who's trying to put forth fake news or deep fakes or anything else? What does it take to get that person to trust you? Because ultimately, facts don't matter. What matters is what you can convince someone of. And, recently we saw Russia releases a deep fake video of Vladimir Zelensky saying, "We've surrendered." A lot of people believed that because it was actually Vladimir Zelensky in a video saying, we've surrendered, we've given up. That type of deep fake video, a lot of people trust that because it looks like the person that's saying that. You see this time and time again. Fake news is trusted because it's coming from maybe a news source, because let's be honest, some of those are somewhat questionable these days. But yeah, exactly. I made the comment, I was like, man, I wake up every morning, I watch Fox News, I watch CNN, so I can be pissed off at everybody.
Exactly. I think you got it covered there. It's like CNN and Fox, you covered the broad spectrum of all of them.
It's like nobody, it's almost impossible. I can't think of a single objective news source that's out there. Everyone has some sort of editorial slant or some sort of underlying message they're trying to get across. And I would just like to have some objective news at some point, but that's an impossibility these days. So, because of that, you read articles, you see the news, maybe it's liked by your friends, whatever, but a lot of people trust those sources. But think about the damage that can be done. You go back to deep fakes. There was an article on Drudge Report 2 days ago that now says that deep fake videos are sophisticated enough that they're able to bypass financial institutions' biometrics security.
Wow.
That's impressive.
I didn't know that.
Really impressive. Yeah, the article's still on Drudge today. I checked it out early this morning. So that's impressive. And deep fakes really haven't been around that long. But think about not only being able to open up bank accounts or take over people's bank accounts, but think about a deep fake video like Vladimir Zelensky, "We've surrendered," or a deep fake video. You've got one of these shootings where a police officer there's a video, police officer shoots an unarmed individual. City blows up. That's a deep fake video. What happens when the real video comes out showing that assailant had a weapon? Well, the damage has already been done. The riots have already taken place, everything else. So that becomes the importance of all of this, is understanding that facts really don't matter anymore. And if you can understand that, to me, nothing is more frightening than that skewing of the perception of mass groups of people to get them to behave like you want them to behave.
So today, now that you've worked with the authorities and the Secret Service and all of them, like, how do you consult? Because I know you work with Fortune 100 and 500. I might have it wrong a little bit, but you work with big corporations,
Sure,
showing them how to protect themselves, which is very important. I mean, one cyber hack on their mainframes, I mean, think of what they could lose.
It's pretty scary when you think about it. It truly is. The threat landscape out there, a lot of people worry about zero-day attacks, these unknown vulnerabilities. 0 days, they're out there, but the real problem is 90% of every single attack uses known exploits. And those known exploits have typically been preached about for years by cybersecurity people. You guys need to take care of this. You guys need to take care of this. And nobody does anything. That's with individuals. It's with companies. My job, what I do, I'm Chief Criminal Officer with Arcos Labs. I'm an ambassador with AARP right now. Speak across the planet, work with Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies as well. What I do is I come in and I first establish how cybercriminals operate, because a lot of companies really don't understand or appreciate that. You see somebody talk about, well, we don't know who attacked us, as if it's a single attacker. It's never a single attacker. It's always a group of people that are working together to victimize you or your company. So I sit down and we talk about that. First of all, that way we educate everyone, get everyone on the same page. Then we look at your company, look at the data, whether it's on the dark web, Telegram, Discord, maybe surface web, because you've got a lot of stuff that's on YouTube, for example, that teaches criminals how to commit crime. Little tutorials on how to do this stuff is available on YouTube for anybody to watch. So you start showing these companies or these clients this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. Then you start talking about this is how it's specifically done. This is how criminals are using tools or what tools are happening to hit you. And these are the security measures you need to put in place to make sure that it stops. So it's a lot of it's education. You know, I'm the guy that used to steal everything. So I'm well trusted within the cybersecurity industry, but you know, I'm not allowed to touch networks. Nobody trusts me that much. You know, they like me, but they don't love me. So,
Well, because they all know that eventually the institution is going to no longer benefit you and you're going to just release yourself.
well, you know, there is that. You know, I make the comment. I was like, if you think about attacks happen online because of status, cash, ideology. You know, status, you're trying to impress your criminal peers. Ideology, somebody's pissed you off. Most of it is cash. And, you know, most cash-based attacks are lowest hanging fruit. The criminal goes in and hits the easiest target that gives the largest return on his investment. And I make the comment a lot during my speeches. I was like, you know, that's the way crime operates, unless you're one of these idiots that's on Facebook saying that you've got 8,000 Bitcoins, at which point I may come out of retirement and come looking for you
8,000
myself.
Bitcoins. Whew. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, everybody looks at crypto and specifically Bitcoin as the big boy, you know, and they think, oh, it's so protected, you know, blockchain and this. All it requires is one password to get into the wallet. Game over. Like I know that everybody's like, oh, it's so protected and everything else can't be hacked. I don't know about that. The hack seems much easier than the hack on just about any other financial institution because it's all held in a wallet that has one password. That's a frightening
and you know,
thing.
what does it take? What does it take to get that password? I had a gentleman I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, had a gentleman from Atlanta that really hit it rich. He was an HVAC guy. He started investing in these tokens, took about 6 years. He's sitting on about $30 million right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he had saw me on another episode of another show, and he reaches out to me. He's like, can you advise me on security? So I got in the car, drove all the way over to Atlanta, and I looked at him, and we're talking about how easy it is to get, you know, someone to give you their password. I looked at him, I was like, well, first of all, what are your pressure points? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, do you have a wife and children? And he's like, no, I don't. I was like, well, that's a positive. And he's like, why is that a positive? And I was like, well, sitting on that kind of money, potentially you have an attacker that comes in, takes one of them and starts asking them questions with a hammer and lets you hear it. And he looks at me and I was like, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Wow. Because
that's what you see. I mean, what does it take? What type of amount does it take for a criminal to do something like that? So you're talking about $30 million. Will you harm somebody for that? Probably. Same thing with if it comes with getting caught, maybe sent to prison. Now criminals understand, and that's why violence is now inherent in the cybercrime communities. It's part of it these days. But you take somebody that is a middleman, middle of the range, or maybe even the top of the heap cybercriminal, they know if they're caught, they know they're going to serve 20 years, 30 years, what have you. So what are they willing to do to make sure that they don't go to prison for that length of time? And that's one of the reasons that you see somebody like Ross Ulbricht that ultimately tries to have 2 people killed. That's the motivations, and it's a real thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back to when you were in prison. I mean, we've all seen the movies. Many people have gone and toured prisons. I mean, those aren't exactly easy institutions to quote unquote release yourself. So how does that happen? I mean, I know you got a lot of wisdom in the criminal side, but
sure.
This is your first time being locked up, correct?
It was. I had served some county jail time, but this was the first time being locked up. I was at a minimum security institution. Now, here's the secret of this stuff. All right. It boils down to, what are you willing to do? Willingness matters, whether you're committing online crime, escaping from prison, whatever you're doing. Willingness matters. What specifically are you willing to do? Because let's be honest, I was at a minimum security prison. All it takes is for you to decide, I'm not staying. But most men don't do that. They sit there and they're not willing to do that. They've spirit been broke. Maybe they're smarter than you are, any number of things like that. But I was always the guy that was like, I am not staying. And I meant that. Nobody thought I meant it, but I meant that. The way I escaped, I got caught. I got caught in Orlando, and because of the money that I'd stolen, I stole like $600,000 in 4 months. That was really what got me that 7 years. Well, yeah, 7 years, 7.5. But knew I was in trouble. And a gentleman comes out, and I was at the federal holding in Orange County in Orlando. And he looks at me, his name was Yeti. He was in there for meth. He looks at me, he's like, hey man, the only time you get off is a drug program. And I was like, I don't have a drug problem. He's like, you can find a drug problem, can't you? And I looked at him and I was like, I can find a drug problem. So they give me this thing called diesel therapy. And diesel therapy, as they transport you, so they were transporting me from Orlando back to Columbia, South Carolina. Not that far of a drive, a few hours, but it takes me 2 weeks to get there because of diesel therapy. Diesel therapy is you stop at every single county jail along the way. You go through processing, which takes 4 to 6 hours. As soon as you get processed and hit your bunk, about an hour later, pack up your shit. It's time to move again. And they do that in order to break your spirit, wear you out, everything else. So they did that. And every single county jail that I stopped at, I would say they ask you as they're doing the processing, are you on drugs? And my answer was yes. And they would ask what? And I was like, well, I'm on cocaine and alcohol. And they were like, do you want help for that? And I was like, absolutely, I need help for that. So by the time I get to Columbia, South Carolina, I've got that paper trail requesting help. I had an attorney that the only really good thing he did for me is a public pretender, not a defender. But the only thing this guy did was he asked the judge to hire or to bring in a psychological evaluation. She agreed. So I'm at the county jail. Psychologist comes in. It's a 4-hour interview. About halfway through, he looks at me. He's like, do you use any type of drugs? I'm like, yeah. Well, what do you use? Cocaine? Smoke or snort? Snort. How much? An 8-ball a day. He looks at me and he's like, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you have any trouble out of that? And I was like, yeah, I can't get an erection. And he looks at me and I'm looking at him, and I had gotten that from watching Boogie Nights, because that end scene with Mark Wahlberg, he's been doing the coke, and boy, he's just, So I was watching that and I was like, it's gotta be right. So I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and I looked at him, I was like, is that correct? And he looks back at me and he's like, it could happen. So that makes it into my pre-sentence report. And the pre-sentence report is basically an in-depth background check that the prosecution and probation office does on you before the judge sees you, so the judge knows how much time in prison to give you. So that makes it in the PSR. I had told everyone in my unit, I told all my family, hey, if they give me any more than 60 months, I am not staying. So the day of my sentencing, prosecutor, he's standing up, and man, he's mad. This guy is screaming at this point. He's like, Johnson has manipulated the prosecution. He's manipulated the Secret Service. He's manipulating you today, Your Honor. We demand the upper limits of the guidelines. Judge looks at me and she's like, I agree, 75 months. And I'm like, huh. I looked at my lawyer and I was like, can we get the drug program? He's like, I don't know, I'll ask. So he stands up, Your Honor, we order the drug program. She says no, but I'll recommend he gets evaluated for it. I looked at him and I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you're probably not going to get it. My exact words, still remember that. My exact words were, how soon can you get me to the camp? He looks at me and he was like, pretty soon if you don't want to appeal. My exact words again were, F the appeal, get me to the camp. I'll take it from there. He looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the world. 6 weeks later, I'm at Ashland, Kentucky. I had family and friends research the facility to see if it had a fence around it. Research said it didn't. I got there, 14-foot fence, razor wire on top. I'm like, that's not good. So I go in. My first question to the processing people, the guards there, were, are there any jobs outside of the fence? The guard looks at me. He's like, well, you can work in the national forest. I was like, no, I'll die out there. And then he was like, well, you can do landscaping. And I was like, I can run a weed eater. So I walked into the landscaping office like 2 days later. Behind the guard's desk, he's got the entire wall behind his desk, an aerial photo of the compound blown up. So you can literally sit there and talk to him as you plot your escape. I'm there for 6 weeks. Of the way that I escaped, my dad, I hadn't seen the man for, I hadn't had a conversation with him for about 25 years. And the guy shows up at my sentencing looks at the judge and he's like, Brett can come and live with me when he gets out. I want to make sure he gets a good start. You know, I've not been in his life. And I didn't know my dad meant that at the time. So my dad comes to visit. About the third visit in, he looks at me. He's like, you know, I've been reading about you online. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's a lot of money you made. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you think you could teach somebody how to do that? So I used to say, when I first started telling that story, I used to say that I thought my dad was back in my life, but he wasn't. And I was lying when I said that. Looking back now, I have a really good relationship with my father. And I really think that, you know, he hadn't seen me in any other way except through the lens of my mom, that criminal activity. And I really think that's the only way he thought he could communicate with me, was starting a conversation like that. And I manipulated the man into helping me escape. He had $4,000 to his name. I got that from him. I got him to drop me off a change of clothes, a cell phone, and a driver's license. And I escaped. I walked away, and lasted about 3-4 weeks. Not Secret Service, but U.S. Marshals finally find me. They were canvassing a 3-state area. Ultimately, I ended up spending 8 months in solitary confinement.
8 months?
Yeah.
Like straight?
Yeah.
Solitary confinement for 8 months.
Yeah, it's interesting.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's what you find out. It's kind of the human mind. And I've seen people that can't adapt, but you know, 99%, almost 100% of everyone that's locked up, it takes them a few days to adapt to that environment. Solitary is really no different. You come in, most people who are in solitary, the first month, 2 months, you sleep, 19 hours a day. You get up to eat, use the restroom, and you're in a 6x9 cell. It's got a toilet, sink, bunk bed sometimes, and you're in there by yourself. And sometimes it's got a fold out desk on the wall with a steel stool. So, you're in there 24 hours a day. You're supposed to, by law, you're supposed to get out an hour a day to walk the yard. That never happens. You're lucky to get out an hour a week. You shower twice a week. Depending on the facility you're at, they either wheel the shower up to the cell, or they handcuff you and walk you to the shower, take the handcuffs off when you're in the shower stall, let you shower for 10 minutes, come back, cuff you up again, walk you back to your cell. And that's the way solitary works. And it gets, I didn't have the first few months, you don't have any books. Then the King James Bible arrives and you're like, hallelujah.
Yeah.
And it then finally, as you're ending up the term, more books arrive, but it gives you a lot of time to think, a lot of loneliness, a lot of sleep. And, it gets so bad because your mind is not engaged with anything. You start to see things, you'll see bugs that ain't there. And,
wow.
You talk to yourself a lot, you answer yourself a lot, but that's solitary. I was 8 months in that. Then they transferred me out to Big Spring, Texas, which was a disciplinary medium-low prison. When I was there, went through 3 prison riots, saw 2 people murdered. Overall, through my incarceration time, saw 4 suicides, and it makes an impression. It does. It makes it. It's the interesting thing is most prisoners are not bad people. They've made bad decisions, is what happens, and they're just looking to get through their time. But you do have predators on the compound. You've got these people where they be sociopaths or just evil people that look to extort you, or if you say something wrong or literally look at them the wrong way or anything else like that, they will try to kill you. I remember one guy, and the interesting thing about prison is etiquette matters. You have to be well mannered. So it's yes, excuse me, please, thank you. If you don't do that, chances are you're not going to be around for long. You're going to be beaten down. Someone's going to pull you to the side, tell you to straighten up, what have you. And if you don't, at that point, you're going to be beaten down, or you got to check yourself in and leave this compound. I remember I was in the lunch line, chow line rather, and this new kid came in. You've got a line of men, 200 long. This new kid comes in. He had just got out of the compound like a day before. New kid comes in, he skips lines so he can be with his buddies. He skips like 75 people. Guy skips, taps him on the shoulder. He's like, hey man, you skipped line. And the kid running his mouth, F you, I'll do what I want to. Don't tell me what to do. Guy taps him on the shoulder again. He's like, hey man, it's not just me that you're skipping, but you're skipping all these men behind you. Kid looks at him. He's like, screw them. Guy's like, you're sure? Kid's like, screw you too. And he's like, okay. So man steps out of line. He goes back to his unit in the chow area, in the cafeteria there. You get these gallon cans of tuna, in the metal cans. Well, what you can do is you can cut that lid off, bend the lid in half, and then you sharpen it on the concrete to make a knife. All right. So the guy goes back to his cell, gets his tuna can lid, comes back, and he just starts slicing the kid up right there in line.
Oh, wow.
And that's the kind of stuff that happens. I mean, it's etiquette matters. You're, because of the crowd there, because of the high anxiety and stress and things like that, that matters. I've seen people come in, like in the county jail, you see people that come in because you're mixed in with people that are going to do 20 years or have been sentenced to 20 years. And you get some guy that comes in for a DUI or something like that. And he's maybe got 3 months, and he's sitting there crying about it every single day, complaining about how much time he's got to do, and he's going to be away from his family. Meanwhile, this man sitting over across the way, he's going to do 20 years. Well, he puts up with that for about 3 days, and then he's had enough of it. And, that's the kind of stuff you got to realize that takes place there. You get people that will never see their family, will never get out again, that have lost everything. Yeah, they made the choice to do that, but that doesn't make those losses any less real. And again, most people that are there, they're not bad people. They're just people who have made bad decisions. They really have a lot of hopes and desires of getting out and doing things properly, leading a legal, good life. But unfortunately, you tend to be released from prison with the exact same tools you go in with. And unless you have, I'm the same way, unless you have a lot of help, a lot of people looking out for you, the chances of recidivating, almost 100%. Absolutely.
Wow. But you've got your second chance. You're doing unbelievable things to prevent the exact things you used to do, and teach companies and law enforcement how to look for this, protect themselves from this. Right. So what does your future look like?
I'm very blessed. I truly am. I talk about it pretty frequently that I've been given a life that I don't deserve, but I'm really grateful to have. And I try to make the most of it every single day. I committed a lot of crimes. I caused a lot of harm. I victimized a lot of people, stole their money, identities, things like that. I don't think that I can make amends for those actions. All right. I don't believe that at all, but I do think that I can make sure that my choices today and every other day are good, healthy choices. So I work hard. I mean, I apply the same type of work ethic that I used to when I was a criminal, which was basically you wake up working and you go to sleep working. So I apply that same type of work ethic to protecting individuals and companies from the type of person that I used to be. Now that's my job. That's what I do to make a living. I speak, I consult. I'm this chief criminal officer and ambassador as well, but I do a lot of free work. I work with law enforcement free. I work with universities free. I do a lot of work with ACFE. Typically, if somebody wants me to come in and speak, I'm going to speak, or I'm going to consult with you. If you're a victim, victims know that they can reach out to me, and I will do every single thing that I can to help them. I'm the guy that, that's the unfortunate thing in industry these days is a lot of people feel that they can't say something because it might cost them their paycheck. It might cost them their job or something. I'm the guy that I'm going to say what needs to be said. I don't give a damn about it. Ultimately, my motivation these days is not cash based. My motivation these days is to not be remembered as the guy who stole everything, but to be remembered as the guy who was able to turn it around and make a positive out of it. That's
really important. And it's almost a dying thing because there's very few people that ever set out on that mission. A lot of selfish people, a lot of people that put themselves in front of everybody else. And what you're doing is you're going out first and foremost and solving people's problems.
Well, there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of fear out there. People are, I don't care what political side of the fence you are on, but people are scared of being canceled. They're scared of being fired. They're scared of being sued sometimes. There's a lot of fear that keep people from speaking up. And let's be honest, sometimes it's difficult to speak up because we want to be liked. We don't want to upset anybody, so we keep our mouths shut. And what a lot of people don't understand is by remaining silent, that these crimes and victimization can continue at that point. If no one says anything, how's it going to be stopped? How are you going to inform people, and how are you ultimately going to stand up and say enough's enough?
I hope that resonates in this audience listening to this, and I hope all of you hang on to that right there, because that is very important. I don't care how you look at it, your give back and what you're doing with your show and everything else, which I want to talk about for a quick second. And, the different things that you've been featured on: CNN Money, Wired Magazine, Vice. You're also featured in the book Kingpin, which most people know of that book. I mean, these are all give backs, folks. But, in today's society, in today's world, being quiet, being in the masses, just following, I hate to say it, but the sheeple and just everybody else may not be the right decision, because you know what? Everything we have in this great country called freedom comes at a cost, and the cost is it's taken from you when you don't stand up, when you don't say the things, when you don't put other people first, and when you don't go out and solve other people's problems. Burying your head in the sand solves nothing.
I agree.
And let's just spend just a couple of seconds. Can you tell everybody about your show and what your goal is for it?
Sure. So I'm on YouTube. I'm on it's called The Brett Johnson Show. And actually, it was like this kind of a little mini epiphany today. I was talking to my wife, and I was like, because I put out a new episode yesterday, and I was like, honestly, I've come to the conclusion that the show, on the surface level, we talk about cybercrime, cybersecurity, identity theft. That's on the surface level, but on a much deeper level, the show is actually about Brett Johnson finding out what it means to be a good, healthy person. So I do these shows like yesterday, talking about addiction, how I was addicted to crime, that was tough for me to talk about, because someone that's addicted, whether it be to drugs, to work, to tobacco. I had a guy comment on tobacco, me with crime, whatever that addiction is, that addiction becomes first and foremost. And in my life, I chose to commit crime over the people that I said I loved. And that meant choosing that. It meant lying to those people. All these other actions came first and foremost, instead of taking that relationship with those people, which is, I had been telling myself, was the most important thing. No, looking back, the most important thing was that life of crime, because that's what I chose above them every single time. And I got to tell you, man, when coming to that conclusion, that realization like that, that's a really tough pill to swallow. Knowing I was married, my first wife, I was married to her for 9 years, and I chose crime every single day above her, and she stuck with me for 9 years in the hopes that I would at some point come to the conclusion that she was the most important. She finally figured out I wasn't going to do that. Then I met another girl I got engaged to, and I was absolutely crazy about her, and she didn't know I was a criminal. But when she finds out, and I chose crime above her, when she finds out, I remember she made this statement of, you could have gotten a real job. And at that point, I didn't understand that, because, my addiction was crime. But, looking back now, she was right. She was right. If I really had cared for her, for my first wife, anything else, I could have done things legally. I'm not an idiot. I could have gotten a successful job doing something, but I chose that criminal activity above that. So, I was talking to my wife today, and I was like, really the show is about that type of journey, what it means to be healthy, what, being a good person, helping people out. And I talk about that frequently on the show, this idea. And I really am of that conclusion now that we're here for two reasons, at least my understanding. My understanding is we're here to know who we are, why we do the things we are. That Rene Descartes thing, know thyself. That's a real thing. I believe that. But we're also here to help people, not hurt. And I think if more people really understood and worked toward that, we would be a hell of a lot better off than we are today as a society.
And Brett, I want to thank you for your time today. And I want to thank you for coming on. Like, what are some other places people can learn more about your mission and what you're doing? Or maybe hey, you never know who's watching. This could be Fortune 50, 500, 100 companies that need your help. I mean, how do they find you?
Well, hey, if you've got a paycheck, I've got something I can do for you, of course, but understand that if you're an individual, if you need some advice, assistance, or anything else, reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on anglerfish.com. That's ANGLERP as in Paul, HISH. That's my website. You can find me on the Brett Johnson Show on YouTube. I read every single one of those comments. So do reach out. Find me on LinkedIn, something like that. Okay. Before we do leave, I want to give some advice on how to secure yourselves credit freezes. So freeze the credit of every single person in the house, including your kids, because kids are the number one victims of identity theft. Credit freezes are free, so please do that. Monitor your accounts and place alerts on those accounts, like with your credit cards, put a $0 alert on that. That way, if a criminal accesses your account, you get a text message saying, hey, someone's trying to victimize me. You can take care of it at that point. Finally, right now, the answer is to use a password manager, because 80% of every single person on the planet uses the same passwords across multiple websites. So use a password manager. Those three things: freeze credit, monitor accounts, place alerts, use a password manager. It makes sure that you're not going to be victimized like 90% of most people that are being victimized out there. You're no longer that lowest hanging fruit. I just wanted to add that.
That's fantastic. And the password manager thing is huge.
It's huge.
I still don't understand why people don't all use that. It makes your life so much easier.
It does. And you don't have to pay to use one.
No.
Chrome's got one built in. Apple's got one that's built in as well. You don't have to pay to use these things, but please do use one.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for the advice. And folks, I hope you all take action on some of this stuff. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. We're putting up tons of them, but I think if you like this one, you'll probably like that video as well. Not only that, I've got a book that I created, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, where we actually show you what the wealthy do in the game they play with money. I want you to have that for free. And if you want to know about all my new videos coming up, click that alert button. Actually, smash that alert button, and you'll be notified every time we put a new video. So we'll see you on the next episode.